caused that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
Computers that DWave has built, but they all operate individually. And yes, they're at different physical locations, but their basic processing system is through quantum entanglement and quantum tunneling. Tunneling is like a telephone line to the other side, to another dimension or multiple dimensions. The quantum entanglement is the actual process that's involved, and you cannot therefore have a computer, an individual one, that operates through quantum entanglement, operating independently. By virtue of the fact that it's quantum entangled, it's also quantum entangled with all the other model computers. All of these computers are networked together. And I'm going to provide you some fairly large numbers that, again, have never been disclosed, that are related to the model numbers of the computers that have not been released to the public.
Let's get into those numbers, Tony. Go for it.
All right, sir. Again, I'm going to work backwards. The punchline. I mentioned that there are 65,536 tubulin dimmers in the human brain. That's also the number of tetrahedrons in the 600-cell tetrahedron. And that's not just my model. This is coming directly out of the published paper, that they're talking about the 600-cell being the definitive model for a quantum computer as well as the definitive model for the universe. So, 65,536 tubulin dimmers, that's also the number of qubits in a quantum computer that would achieve consciousness. That's the number of qubits you have to have for a computer to think on its own and be sentient. So we work backwards from that mathematically, and it takes you down through the numbers of the DWave computers, including the latest one they released last year publicly was the 1024. I'm going to run through the numbers very quickly. Basically, you're dividing by 2. 65,536 down to 32,768. Keep dividing. You get to 8192, 4096, 2048, 1024, 512, 256, and 128. From 1024, 512, 256, 128, those are the public numbers that have been released of the models of the computers. When we begin 2048, that's not been released. It's due out this year, 2017, I should say. That is the code that they had to break. That's Shor's algorithm 2048. When they broke the code, they then had the ability to create the key to the bottomless pit, which is 4096. Then they were able to access the gate, which they haven't done it yet, but the gate itself is 8192 qubits. That's IXXX, I in Roman numerals. I, double XI, that's 911. The 8192 translates to.
Brave New Worlds is about a futuristic society that has tried to create a perfect community where everyone is happy. They use science to mass-produce people and condition them to do and want only the things they're supposed to. But in doing that, they take away freedom, like the freedom to think for oneself. The few characters we see who do think for themselves aren't happy. So the novel poses a question. Is it better to be happy or free? The book's
CRISPR could be responsible for a new era of genetically perfected plants, animals, and even humans, but what the heck is it? Hello there, imperfect humans. Trace here for you. A few years ago, something called clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic CRISPR burst into the scene. It worked so well, scientists began issuing ethical statements about its use. CRISPR cuts DNA strands with unprecedented accuracy and simplicity, allowing geneticists to directly edit any of Earth's organisms however they like. CRISPR could be used to engineer disease-free organisms, formulate high-yield crops, or even cure genetic and hereditary human conditions. Of course, it could theoretically also be used to let parents pick their kid's sex, eye color, height, or whatever. In the end,
Trump would not be permitted to win. Banks, intelligence, arms companies,
They all want him beat.
foreign money, etc.,
Yeah.
is all united behind Hillary Clinton, and the media as well. So media owners and even journalists themselves.
Donald Trump's lack of support from any corner of any establishment is pretty much the opposite of the situation that Hillary Clinton is in. But can too much support be a bad thing, especially when it lumps you in a club with some pretty dubious members?
There's a early 2014 email from Hillary Clinton, so not so long after she left Secretary of State, to her campaign manager, John Podesta. That email, it states that ISIS, is funded by Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
I'm doing good.
There you
Hi,
are.
Anthony.
Hey, Chris and Tim. It's great to be back together with you guys. Thanks for the invite.
So today we're going to be combining research Chris just came across with the 4096 code and how that contributes to our overall understanding of what Anthony has been working on recently. Could you start us off with the 4096 material?
I came up with this mathematically, just as the progression of the model numbers of DWave's adiabatic quantum computers. 4096 represents an adiabatic quantum computer that operates on qubits. 4096 is the number of qubits within this computer. I sent that to you guys, as I do most of my research when I think it's pertinent to what you're looking at, and you blew me away. Absolutely, I had no idea the ramifications of that number in terms of the cosmos, the entities, the planetary alignments, and the literal translation of 4096. So let's just kind of recap a little bit, because I recall your video that the two of you produced. And what struck me is what you said, 4096 is related directly to Shiva. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So for the benefit of myself as well as the audience, can you break down that relationship just a little bit more? Can you tell me, does 4096 translate to Shiva in some form? What do you see the relationship between 4096 and Shiva to be?
Well, I think it's the same story about the gamble that Thoth did with Sin, the moon god, in order to gather 5 days for Osiris, Nephthys, Set, and Isis to be born. And that is the birth. That is the resurrected Saturn. Then there
Things just descending on humanity all at one time. So that's what spurred today's show as far as the predictive programming. So I said to Chris, well, let's take a look at all these movies that we're seeing, because I'm seeing a lot of this Nephilim giant symbolism in these movies. We absolutely found some really interesting connection. Where would you like to start, Chris?
Well, I wanted to comment and say that even in the Denver airport, they have Titans, giant monsters coming out from underneath the ground, like an art display.
Yeah.
It is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines. At the heart of this big box is a tiny chip about the size of your thumbnail. And on this chip resides all of the wonder and magic that makes this thing go. I'm not going to describe in any mathematical detail how it all works, but let me give you an analogy. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept that a thing can exist in two states which are mutually exclusive, at the same time, quote unquote. So I'm using those words because the English language was developed before we had concepts to describe what these things actually are doing. But I'm going to give you a roundabout way of understanding this. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip, which is a contraction of quantum bit. And that qubit is very much like a bit or a transistor in a conventional computer. It has two distinct physical states, which we call 0 and 1 for bit. In a conventional computer, these are mutually exclusive. That device is either one or the other, and never anything else. In a quantum computer, that device can be in this strange situation where these two parallel universes have a nexus, a point in space where they overlap. And when you increase the number of these devices, every time you add one of these qubits, you double the number of these parallel universes that you have access to, until such time when you get to a chip like this, which has about 500 of these bits, you have something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip.
A consortium of top scientists have besieged the global leaders at the Davos Forum to please stop the AI technocrat takeover, and are warning that the electronic smart grid hooked into AI computers will give rise to an AI takeover.
2 U.S. spy planes have been intercepted over the Black Sea near the Russian border. RT's Murad Gaziev has more details.
Russian Defense Ministry says several American spy planes, surveillance aircraft, try to approach the Russian border from the direction of the Black Sea. They did this with their transponders off. Those are the...
Well, thank you, Sheila, and it's a delight to be on with you. And I find it joyful that we get to talk about, obviously, what I would call the root of evil, the times Jesus himself spoke about, and stating that there would never be a time like this, nor ever has been in history, and that with the rainbow now being usurped by the entire, if you will, illuminist/gay movement of the world, it's astonishing to me that more Christians haven't stood up to speak out, not just of the obvious issue, but of, let's talk about the history of the rainbow. Let's talk about the history of the Noahic times, or the times of Noah prior to the flood. And if we even begin to understand, there's so much there to deal with that it lays out, if you will, a footprint for scholars and Christians not to have to back down. Evolution could have never taken its...
Internet globalization. On Saturday, unless something unforeseen happens, the U.S. will hand over the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, to a multilateral body called the United Nations International Telecommunications Union, which effectively relinquishes U.S. control of the Internet. As with the inclusion of the Chinese yuan happening on Jubilee weekend, we think this is also a statement from the elites that power is being taken away from the U.S. and being given to the UN.
Speculated that Obama would actually consider the possibility of a third term given the Democrat Party's weak field of candidates for 2016 with this.
Yeah, well, we actually went out on a limb predicting that Pope Benedict would step down. We thought that he would step down in March or April of 2012, and since no pope had done what we said he was going to do for 600 years, we kind of put our neck out there on the chopping block. But that's what we thought was happening. We even felt that there was something unusual, prophetic, that was unfolding around this.
Which he described this dream. And in the dream, he predicted 3 world wars.
For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, Then shall the Lord go forth to fight against